Hi, welcome to Photoshop Day 3. Today we'll be going over Photomerge, which will help us make panoramas in Photoshop, and we'll be doing a lot of getting rid of stuff, so some retouching. For example, if I look at this photo here, I have an outlet in the bottom left corner. We definitely don't want that in our picture, so we'll be going over a few tools to get rid of stuff like that. It's also really good for getting rid of blemishes and skin, so it'll be a lot of fun. Okay. Let's go ahead and download these files. Hopefully you got a link to our Google Drive so you can have access to these photos. I'm going to right click and hit download, but actually I've already done that. So I'm going to go over to my downloads. And then once you have it downloaded, go ahead and open it up. And you'll have to extract all files because they are in a zip folder. Okay. Extract. Alright, so we have our photos here. I'm just going to close out of these other things I have open. And go ahead and open up Dang Outlet. So I've already opened it up in Photoshop, but to do that you just click and drag it right to Photoshop and you should be able to drop it in there and it will open up. Okay, let's start by first reviewing something from day 1. First of all, don't forget to Control J to jump that layer so that you can get a duplicate, and that way we'll always have our backup in case we mess up this document. Okay, so a little bit of review from day 1. We used the spot healing brush to get rid of some lint on a black skirt. So we're going to use that right here on this outlet. Don't forget to use your bracket keyboard shortcuts to make your brush bigger or smaller. I'm just going to click on the outlet and it's like magic, it just disappeared and it looks great. But just for the sake of showing you another tool, I'm going to Control Z, undo that, and I'm going to show you the patch tool. So if I right click on the spot healing brush and go to the patch tool, this is kind of like patching a pair of jeans or something with a hole in them. So in this case, the outlet would be the hole of our jeans, and we want to cover it up with some good fabric. For example, like this wall that is right next to the outlet. We want to just patch that onto the outlet. So to do that, you want to just click and drag and select the unwanted object. So this is kind of working like the lasso tool, which we talked about in day 2. You just kind of freehand it, but you can do a rough job. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm just going to click and drag, and it's going to show me what those pixels will look like when they're patching up that outlet. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to let go and then do Control D to deselect. And that looks pretty awesome. I can't even tell it was there, right? So that's another great tool. I prefer the patch tool when I'm dealing with like gradient backgrounds or solid colors. It does a really good job with that. So for example, if you're trying to get something out of the sky, patch tool is amazing for patching sky. Okay, let's go ahead and open up a new photo now. This one looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to my file browser and let's open up exit sign. I'm going to click and drag it to Photoshop, and like it says in the title, we want to get rid of this exit sign here. There's one right here. It's blurry, but it is an exit sign. And then there's also a fire escape thing. Sorry, my computer's kind of freezing up here, but it's not letting me pan. Okay, yeah, in the top left corner we have a little fire alarm thing. So I'm actually just going to patch that. I'm on my patch tool anyways, so might as well. Okay, Control J to duplicate our layer, and I'm gonna grab this And you'll want to leave some buffer space. See how I didn't select it so tightly around the red? I left a little bit of buffer space, and that's important. I'll show you why in a second. Okay, and then I'm going to click and drag and just copy these pixels here. Okay, Control D, that looks awesome. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like if I didn't select it with the buffer space. So if I just do a real tight job of it, and I try to fix that, that's what it looks like. So because it was kind of blurry, we actually do have darker pixels around that red that we didn't really notice before, but you'll see how it's kind of fuzzy around the edges. So you really want to get a generous selection here, and that will be a lot better to work with. Okay, I'm going to move on to the exit sign now. I'm going to move over, and I'm going to patch this one as well. Let's see if that looks good. A lot of working with these tools is just figuring out which ones work best in certain situations, and sometimes you'll want to use a combination of them. Okay, that wasn't too bad, but if you look closely, you can kind of see the outline of the patch that I did. So that's not ideal. I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to actually introduce a new tool, the Clone Stamp tool. It's 2 tools below the patch tool. Click on that, and this Clone Stamp tool works a lot like a brush, but you're brushing or you're painting with pixels from a source. So, for example, with this exit sign, I probably want to paint over it with pixels from down below it or above it that are similar to the exit sign. So to define a source, I'm going to hold Alt, or if you're on a Mac, it's Option, and your cursor will change to this little crosshairs, the target button, or icon, I'm not sure what to call it, and that is going to let you define a target source. So I want to just grab probably right here. I'm going to click while holding Alt and then let go of Alt. And now if I hover over my exit sign, it'll show me a preview of what those pixels will look like painted on top. Cool, so I'm going to start painting. Click and drag. And notice how below my brush there's a little plus sign, and that is showing us where our source is. As we drag this brush, it's going to drag the source along too. So if I go too far, it's actually going to paint on the exit sign again, because notice how the plus is right where our exit sign used to be. So you really want to be careful about where you are painting. You don't want to go too far. And a trick with the Clone Stamp tool, if you're doing something on a bigger scale than this, the exit sign is pretty small. But if you're doing, you know, a huge building in the background of a picture and you want to just get rid of it or something, you're going to want to define multiple sources. So you'd have to hold Alt, click another source, and copy those pixels on, and kind of do that over and over again to get the best retouching job done. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I think that looks better than the patch tool. So I'm going to probably just close out of that. I'm not going to save because I don't care to keep this photo, but we did a good job. And we're going to open up the rice bowl. Okay. This one is a lot of fun. So I'm going to introduce one more retouching option here. So Control J to duplicate our layer. And let's say I want to get rid of this wrapper in the right side of the photo because it doesn't look too great and it was just some trash that was left in the photo. So you could clone stamp this pretty well, but I'm going to show you a different way to do it. So I'm going to go to my lasso tool. And generally, the lasso tool is really not your best selection tool, but for this purpose, I actually really like it because I can go in any direction I want, and I want to leave that buffer space, which some other tools wouldn't let me do. So I'm going to select around my wrapper, just like we did with the patch tool, leave some buffer space. Close off my selection here. Okay, great. Now I want to fill this, so I'm going to go up to my Edit menu, Edit, Fill. The shortcut is Shift F5. And now in this drop down you have a few options. Make sure it's on Content Aware. And what that means is this selection is going to be aware of the content around it and inside of it. So it's going to grab pixels from around it and replace the content with those pixels. Okay, let's see if it works. Voila! Control D, deselect. That did a pretty good job. For some reason, sometimes when I zoom out, it shows me a little preview of what it used to look like. That's weird. But yeah, that looks pretty awesome. So that is called Content Aware Fill. And I use that a lot, actually, for like getting the birds out of skies or something. It's a really great tool. Okay, if we look at this table, it has some scratches, which I'm going to try to get rid of some of them so we can have a nice polished photo. I'm going to just use the spot healing brush, but you can use whatever tool you'd like. The nice thing about having a duplicate layer as well is that we can see the before and after of this image. That'll be fun, because we are improving it by a ton. Obviously there are way too many scratches on my kitchen table, but we don't have to get rid of all of them today. Just do a rough job, get some practice. Okay, I'm going to call that good for now. I'm going to zoom out again. And then we also have the corner or the edge of my table in the very bottom of the photo, and I probably want to crop that so it's not showing. That looks kind of weird. So I'm going to go to my crop tool, cut that out, and press enter or hit this check mark up in the control panel. There we go. Alright. I didn't notice this until now actually, but we have like a weird reflection on our bowl. That can easily be patched out. Great. And now finally, just to make this photo look finished, I'm going to go ahead and add an adjustment layer. So I'll go to this circle with the half moons. I call it the Oreo cookie. And I'm going to select the curves adjustment layer. And to increase contrast, I'm just going to bring those highlights up and bring the shadows or darker areas down. And let me take a look at what that looks like. Oh, that looks way better. Okay, and then I might also want to warm it up a bit. It's kind of a cold photo. Color balance. Just warm that up a little bit. Great. Okay, we're done with that one. Let's go ahead and work on this Clone Fill 2. I really need to rename these. Okay. So here we have a church building, but we have this darn pole in the right side over here. So we want to get rid of that pole. And to do that, you will probably want to use a combination of the tools I've taught you. So you'll want to use the patch tool probably for the sky, and then the clone stamp, or the patch tool again for these more detailed areas in the roof and down on the walls of the building. Okay, I'm going to Control J, and if you would like to do it on your own, you can just pause this video, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how I would make this pole go away. So I'm going to use the patch tool, grab this pole here, and then just move that over. Let's see, let's move it this way. Control D. Perfect. Now I'm going to zoom in real close. That's another important habit to get into when you're retouching, is to zoom in a lot because you really want to get those details. Now I'm going to go to my clone stamp. I like the clone stamp for getting these harsh lines in the roof because I can see exactly what's going to happen. So I'm going to define my source and just copy that straight line over. See how when I hover I can see exactly where those pixels are going to line up? That's why I like the clone stamp in this situation. Okay, I'm going to paint, but eventually I'm going to run into that roof there. See how that did the angled part of the roof? We don't want that. So I'm going to Control Z, define my source again. This time I'm going to select closer to my pole, maybe decrease my brush size, and oh, that wasn't quite right. Okay, now I'm going to grab another source here, right on the line, so I can just move it over. Oh, I'm starting to get that roof. Let's see. So you'll see what I mean when I said that you want to define your source a lot to get a really good retouching. Okay. Now this part's hard because it's kind of at an awkward corner of the wall, but I'm just gonna fake it. Grab some of this. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just practicing our tools here. Okay. So looking at that, you would never think there was a pole there, right? You could go in and make those shadows look a little more normal. Right now they're kind of weird on top of the roof here. But we're going to leave it like that for now. Okay. Let's open up Clone Fill 5. So I'm actually not going to work on this one with you, but I do want to show you that it's there. So we have a crease down the middle of the photo. This is probably an old photo somebody scanned, and the tools that we've learned today are really good for photo restoration. So good opportunity to work on your family history. So to get rid of this crease, I would probably use a combination of the spot healing brush and the patch tool and the clone stamp tool, honestly, because for the forehead area, the spot healing brush would be really good because you have that like kind of flat area around it, not too many fine details, and so it'll be a really good tool for blending those all together. But for example, with the hair, you have those details with the lines in his hair, and you'll probably want to use the clone stamp tool. And same with his eyebrow here, or his nose and lips. So yeah, that one is quite a project, so I'm not going to do it right now, but it will be good practice if you'd like to work on that. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to Photomerge panoramas. So if I double click in that folder, I see that I have an arch panorama made of 3 images that I could stitch together, or we have Bear Lake, and this one has a few more images, so that one would take a little longer for Photoshop to process, but not too long. I'm going to go into Photoshop and go to File, Automate, Photomerge. So you should get this panel that pops up, and we want to browse for our files. Hit Browse, and go ahead and navigate to your documents. Okay, we want to navigate to the Photomerge panoramas and select Arch and just grab these files. Okay. And then down here it says blend images together, vignette removal, these other options. I think we can just leave it as blend images together. Vignette removal is really good if you have a certain lens that just naturally puts vignettes on every photo, because stitching those together will look really weird if you have those individual vignettes, but we're going to leave that unchecked because I think these photos will be okay. I'm going to press OK and let Photoshop work its magic. It's going to take a few seconds to stitch all the edges together. Okay. You might have a different image than I do, which is kind of just a finicky thing with the Photomerge, is sometimes it'll come in a certain way and other times it'll be completely different. But I've actually never had this arrangement before. Usually it's a lot less checkerboard space, which just means empty pixels. There's nothing there. So you might have that image, which is fine. That's actually a better image probably. Mine looks a little stretched over here. But that's okay, we're going to work with it. So you'll see down here, what it's done is masked out certain parts of your image to stitch them together. Which is super cool that it does that automatically. But what I want to do is actually combine these layers into one. So I'm going to right click on a layer and select Merge Visible. And then I'm going to go to my Magic Wand tool by right-clicking on my Quick Selection tool. And now we're going to use the Content Aware Fill that we did earlier to fill in these empty pixels with pixels from the photo. So you'll see what I mean in a second, but go ahead and click on the checkerboard. And mine went all the way around, which is great, but yours might have not selected all the checkerboard. Make sure you have marching ants going around all the checkerboard, and if you don't, hold Shift and click on the remaining checkerboard that isn't selected. Okay, then go to Edit, Fill, and you're going to leave it at Content Aware and press OK. Mine has a lot more space to fill than you do, probably. Control D. Okay, that did an amazing job. Look at the sky. I mean, I can't even tell that that's fake. That's awesome. I did forget to duplicate my layer before I did the content aware fill, so that was my mistake, but you do want to always duplicate your layer. Okay, so it's looking really good. The top left corner is kind of weird. We have some sky poking through the rock, so that stuff you can fine-tune just by using like the clone stamp tool. And then it's also kind of fun to try to, oh, look, it's pulling the church from the other document. That's another cool thing is you can clone stamp from document to document. Okay, I'm going to select my source here and just copy that on. So it's kind of obvious that that's an exact copy of it, but that's okay. So now that you know these tools, you'll probably look at photos and advertisements and start to notice things that people are copying certain parts of an image and just placing it onto another part. You'll start to get really good at recognizing that, which is a good, like it's a blessing and a curse. Okay, so to get rid of all of these people, you might use the clone stamp, or I actually like to just use the rectangular marquee tool, select them, and do Shift F5, which was the shortcut for content aware fill. Press OK. And it doesn't do a perfect job every time, but it's kind of just a really quick way to get rid of those people. So you might have thought that Shift F5 was a ridiculous shortcut to remember, but I actually use it enough that it really speeds up my process. Oh, that grabbed some of his leg. That's funny. Just get rid of that. I've got some shadow here. It's kind of grabbing too much, so I'm going to just Alt, select the other stuff. Okay, Shift F5, and that's gone. Okay, great. Now we have our finished image. One more thing I like to do with this image is actually use a mask on an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to my Oreo cookie, to my adjustment layers button, and then I'm going to select, let's do curves. So I noticed that the arch is kind of dark, and that is kind of the subject of the image, so I want that to be well exposed. And to do that, I want to add a curves layer, but if I just expose for that arch, the left side of my photo gets super bright and way overexposed. So I kind of want to just affect the right side of the photo. So I'm exposing for that arch. That looks a lot better. And now I want to add a mask to this. And I want to add a gradient mask. So I'm going to go to my gradient tool. And right now, in the top in the control panel, it shows me that it's going to go from white to black. So if I draw a gradient on this mask, it's going to go from white to black, which is actually the opposite of what we want. Because if you remember from day 2 with masks, black is where it's not affecting the layer, and then white is where it is. So black are the holes in your mask. And we don't want a hole in the right side of the mask, or the right side of this photo, because that's where the arch is. We want it the opposite way. So I'm going to hit reverse up here in the control panel, and now it's going from black to white, which is what we want. So I'm going to click and drag to draw my gradient, and that looks pretty good. You might want to click and drag a couple times and see what you like. You can always redraw your gradient, which is really nice. Cool. I think that looks a lot better. Let's see what that looks like without that change. Great. Now we did blow out the sky a little too much, so that's when you could go in and use your brush tool to adjust your mask a little bit. So I'm going to select my brush tool, make it way bigger, and I want to paint with black this time. And right now you'll see over here it's on white, so I want to switch that. Oops. I'm going to switch it with the double arrow. Ooh, Now our sky's coming in. That might be a little too strong. So because it's a little too strong, I'll actually Control Z and then change my opacity to like 70. Oh, that's still too strong. I'm gonna do 40. Maybe a little more for the right side, because that's super blown out. There we go. So obviously there's a little more you could do over here to make it look more cohesive, but that looks a lot better, I think, than the original. Yeah, I would probably go in with a transparent, almost transparent brush and just get this part to smooth it out. Cool. You might also want to add a color balance adjustment layer and just warm up the photo to really get those reds of the rock. Because that's what Arches really looks like, is red rock. We just had kind of a cool photo before, but now it's looking a lot warmer. Awesome. Okay, I think we're done with that image. And now if you'd like, you can go in and try the same for this Bear Lake photo. That one's also got a lot of this like mud here. I'll show you what I mean. Right here there's a lot of mud, and it'll be good practice to use the clone stamp tool and other tools to get rid of that and replace it with this pretty grass. That's quite the project though, so I'm not going to do that on here, but just know that you have those files and you can work on that on your own. Okay, that's all we had for today for day 3 of Photoshop. Next class we'll be learning about non-photo based creations. Thanks for watching.